From the earliest days of the investigation, Wichita detectives sensed that the person responsible for the Otero murders was not impulsive. Crime scene analysts noted the absence of chaos. Furniture had not been overturned in panic. There were no signs of a hurried escape. Even in the face of unexpected resistance, the offender had remained focused. That detail alone set BTK apart from many violent criminals law enforcement encountered. Detectives began working with the assumption that the killer was local. He moved through neighborhoods without hesitation. He knew which houses felt safe to enter and which didn't. He understood the rhythms of the city, the quiet hours, the blind spots, the routines. People followed without thinking. This was not someone passing through. This was someone who belonged. As tips poured in, officers followed thousands of leads. Some were credible, most weren't. Wichita residents called in suspicious co-workers, neighbors, and ex-spouses. Every tip had to be logged, assessed, and either eliminated or pursued. The sheer volume of information became a burden of its own. Investigators knew that somewhere inside the noise was a truth they couldn't yet see. When the first BTK letters arrived, detectives immediately recognized their strategic value and their danger. On one hand, the letters confirmed the killer was alive and paying attention. On the other hand, they gave him exactly what he wanted: engagement. Each response risked feeding his ego, but silence risked escalation. So investigators walked a careful line. The letters were dissected in detail. Linguistic experts examined sentence structure, vocabulary, and tone. Profilers focused on the emotional content, not what BTK said, but why he said it. He wasn't writing to confess, he was writing to instruct, to criticize, to remind police that he was still in control. That control became the cornerstone of the behavioral profile. BTK was not driven by frenzy, he was driven by authorship. He wanted his crimes to be understood on his terms. As the years went on, the case evolved into something that existed more on paper than in the field. Detectives rotated off the task force. New investigators inherited boxes of reports, crime scene photographs, and transcripts of letters written decades earlier. Each generation of law enforcement brought fresh eyes, but also the frustration of starting over with no clear suspect. By the time the murder stopped in 1991, investigators were left with an uncomfortable truth. They hadn't failed because they missed something obvious. They had failed because BTK gave them nothing obvious to catch. For years, detectives quietly debated whether the killer was dead. It would have been the simplest explanation. But simplicity rarely matched reality. Some believed he was incarcerated for an unrelated crime. Others believed he had simply aged out, his body no longer able to carry out what his mind still wanted. No one could be certain, and that uncertainty lingered. When technology began advancing in the late 1990s and early 2000s, cold case units revisited old files with cautious optimism. DNA databases expanded. Digital forensics has improved. But without new evidence, BTK remained locked in the past. Then the letters resumed. For investigators still connected to the case, the renewed contact was a jolt. The voice they remembered, condescending, self-assured, theatrical, had returned unchanged. It was as if time had not touched him at all. This time, however, law enforcement was determined not to repeat old mistakes. Every interaction was planned, every response reviewed. The goal was not to challenge BTK, but to let him reveal himself. Detectives understood that the killer's greatest weakness was the same thing that had driven him all along: the need to feel superior. When he asked about tracing a floppy disk, investigators immediately recognized the significance of the question. It revealed his mindset. He wanted reassurance. He wanted permission to continue the game without risk. The lie they told him, that the disk could not be traced, was not casual. It was tactical, and it worked. When the disk arrived, forensic analysts treated it like a crime scene. Metadata was extracted carefully. Deleted files were recovered. What emerged was not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet one. A church name, a document author, a person. At that moment, decades of speculation narrowed to a single name. Surveillance teams moved in discreetly. There was no rush. Detectives understood the importance of certainty. They observed Dennis Rader's daily routines, his work schedule, his movements through the city. Everything aligned with what they had known for years but could never prove. The arrest plan reflected the lessons learned from studying BTK's psychology. Officers avoided confrontation. They avoided spectacle. They knew that stripping him of control abruptly could provoke unpredictable behavior. Instead, they treated him like what he had always been, a man who relied on routine. When Rader was taken into custody, he did not lash out. He did not deny. His question, asking whether he was being arrested for the BTK murders, confirmed what investigators already suspected. He had been waiting for this moment. During interrogation, detectives observed something both unsettling and clarifying. Rader spoke not as a man overwhelmed by guilt, but as a man relieved of secrecy. He corrected details, clarified timelines. He wanted the record to be exact. For law enforcement, this behavior reinforced everything they had learned. BTK was not motivated by chaos or emotional release. He was motivated by documentation. He wanted his story preserved accurately. In court, as Rader confessed, investigators watched the final stage of a case that had consumed careers. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final twist. Just a man methodically recounting crimes while families listened, searching for meaning. Afterward, many detectives described a strange emptiness. The hunt was over, but the understanding it brought was unsettling. BTK had not hidden in isolation. He had lived openly, predictably among them. For law enforcement, the case became a cautionary study, one that reshaped how behavioral profiling was taught and how cold cases were approached. It demonstrated that the greatest threat was not always the most visible, that patience, not brilliance, often defined survival, and that time, when combined with ego, could undo even the most careful offender. Dennis Rader was ultimately captured not because he changed, but because the world around him did. And for those who chased him, the lasting lesson was this: the most dangerous criminals are not always the ones who look dangerous. Sometimes, they are the ones who understand systems well enough to hide inside them. Thanks so much for tuning in today, friends. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If there's anyone special you'd like us to discuss next time, please leave their name in the comments below. We're always eager to hear your thoughts, so please don't hesitate to share them. Remember, your support means the world to us. So, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and spread the word by sharing this video with your circle. Until we meet again, keep the curiosity alive. With love to the Midnight Vault.